Any other questions on that? 19. No? Okay, now we'll go back to 20. Resolution 5, 2015, defining the uses of the half-cent city sales tax. I don't know if you want to start, or if the mayor wants to start, or... Sure.
I think everybody knows the origin of the half-cent sales tax was passed several years ago. The way it goes into now, I think there's a handout here, it goes into a special revenue fund in the city. The resolution, it was again in the handout 2013-13, provided that the half-cent city sales tax be deposited into a special revenue fund for the professional fees, advertising, mailing fees in connection with efforts to establish a city school system, costs associated with the proposed establishment and or operation of the city school system, and to the extent available for acquisition of a new city library. The resolution provides for the resolution 515 with an amendment to that second paragraph. It provides that. Yeah, I want the new one. You revised the new one before. Yeah, that's right.
Well, all I did was basically reword the
exact. It is
reword,
yeah, that's right.
Nothing changed.
Yeah, to rechange it. Change it again, paragraph 2, that it be further resolved that the remainder of this fund, which already resides in a special revenue fund, to be used to fund any additional education budgetary expenditures approved by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, after which the remainder will be held in said special revenue fund as a contingency for any major expenditures which may be needed for the health and welfare of the city of Millington. As you know, you may not know, now the city has a school system. You are the funding body for the school system. Of course, the majority of the funding comes from state revenue, some funding comes from federal revenue, and some funding comes from city revenue. This half-cent sales tax is used to fund the city's portion of what's commonly called maintenance of effort. The maintenance of effort basically provides that no LEA shall use state funds to supplant total local current operating funds, excluding capital outlay of debt service. This is a subsection of the TCA. Shall not apply to a newly created LEA in any county. There's basically a 3-year exception on this.
When's ours go into effect? What's the date?
We are in the first year. The first funding, so that we had last budget year, didn't really count. My understanding from conversations with the state is this is our first year. Next year will be the second year, and the third year, whatever you do in the third year, will be your maintenance of effort for the 4th year and on.
So are we talking 2017, 18?
You're in 14, 15, so 15, 16 you're okay, so 16, 17
is where you set the bar.
Is where you set the bar.
16, 17.
Okay, now, before, I want to make sure the one you handed out is not the one that was in the packet.
Yeah, this is the original one.
We're talking about the one that's in the packet right now.
Okay, but the one with yellow is...
The one with yellow was after a few of you called. I talked to Gerald.
Okay.
And that's what I read from the one with yellow.
They're basically the same thing in the order because the second resolved on the original.
No, they're not.
They're really not.
No, they're not the same.
They're not the same.
Well, you're right, except for the major expenditures. You're right.
Well, they
for some reason
they're totally different from this one.
Okay. Both the resolution.
I'm looking at the current one.
Right. The
We're
resolution
living under now.
The resolution.
Oh
yes.
It's totally different.
No, all it changed was that one paragraph.
Which?
But you've got in here that we're going to put in a special revenue fund that has a contingency for any major expenditures which may be needed for health and welfare of the city of Millington, which means you're going to take the city sales tax and convert it back into general fund. And that's not acceptable.
Okay, but let's make sure we're all on the same page, because I've gotten this question from a bunch of citizens. I've gotten this question from a bunch of citizens. So Gerald, help me understand. The citizens voted originally to form from a school system,
In one
which would be supported by the equivalent of 15 cents on a property tax,
That's correct.
okay?
State law requires that you provide 15 cents or equivalent.
Okay.
It's part of the charter.
And that was what was on the ballot that people voted on.
That's correct.
Okay, and then there was a second item on the ballot that was to increase sales tax by 1/2 cent, period,
That's correct.
which by law goes into the general fund.
Goes into the city's general fund.
Because in order for it to go into anything other than that, it would have had to have had a 2/3 vote when it was on the ballot.
There's a different, there was a different statute in order to fund the school by that, yes. This money just goes into the general operating.
Because a lot of citizens have said that's not what I voted on. And what they voted on was a 1/2 cent sales tax.
Yes, it happened to be at the same time.
It happened to be at the same time, and I get that, and I understand where there might be some confusion. And then this handout, I want to make sure I understand this, is from each of the other municipalities, and we're the only one that's actually even taken the step to move it somewhere beyond the general fund and put it in a local sales tax account, correct?
I'm going off this, I can speak to Arlington, Bartlett, and Lakeland. I haven't spoken to Conklin, Germantown, but I think John did.
I called all the finance directors of all the municipalities, and between that and websites, gathered all the information on this table at the request of several.
Okay, so where we have put it, at least designates all the sales tax money into one place, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so if the intent of that was to use it for schools and only if there were some emergency, I mean, my whole issue with this all along has been the request to just write a check for the money to the school system, okay? Because that's not what the citizens voted for. They voted for it to go into the general fund and then for it to be used to supplement the $19 million that the school budget already has from other sources.
Nope. That's not.
That's not what.
Okay, so what,
I
I guess, so this is why I want us to have this
Okay,
discussion.
we need to have this discussion, because on May the 6th, in this Board of Mayor and Alderman of 2012, we met to discuss this referendum. Okay. And at that time, Barbara Lapidus was our attorney, and she explained to us, and Chris, you were there, that in order for this to go into a designated fund just for the schools, there's two different laws, like Gerald said, they would have to have a 2/3 majority vote. We knew that. Okay. At that time, Mr. Dakin came up and was trying to clarify where this money was going to go to. And what Mayor Carter said, you have to trust your elected officials to put it in the right place.
That's
Okay.
exactly what she
That's exactly what she said. Well, when we passed this first resolution, we put it in the right place. We put it in a special revenue fund where it could not be touched by the general fund. There's no reason to change that. Because the people, I've gotten many phone calls like you have. I went, if you recall, we had to go to Chancery Court. Myself and Mayor Carter and Doug Dakin went to Chancery Court to fight for the city sales tax. The SES study came out and said that we could not afford a school just by our property taxes, 15 cents alone. We'd have to be augmented by the city sales tax. There's no question in anybody's military mind in this town that they were voting for the city sales tax, even though we know, we're intelligent enough to know that we couldn't do it with the 2/3 vote. We knew that. So if anybody to think otherwise, that this is not designated for schools, is wrong. Absolutely, totally wrong.
So I asked, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I don't think it's saying anything that's very different. What Bethany was trying to say was that we're just trying to clarify that we're not going to write a blank check for the amount of the sales tax every year.
Got no problem with that.
And that's fine. And I completely understand. I saw the video you're talking about, Mike, today. And it made me cringe. And I completely understand the frustration and the fear, that was accompanied with, when we released this going to be on the agenda. But with that being said, Gerald said it. He said it right. The majority of their funding comes from the state and federal government. They work for $30 million budget. But with the budget, even though that's the case, when they need something, right away, or they need something for huge capital upgrades, they can't just call up, second
Set up on it.
an amended resolution to Mr. Dorsey. Last week it said that, it basically said that, what it is, instead of health and welfare, it's set for the purpose of education.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I had talked with Dr. Roker on this, went over and talked to him, and I think he agrees with the city retaining this money, then as you request it, then we can review it and provide it to you.
Yeah,
So-
and,
No problem with that, just that it doesn't go into the general fund.
So if that's the case, do we even need to vote on this tonight? Because it's a resolution, and it could, I mean, if we get 2 years down the road and need money because of some emergency, or there's,
right.
you
I
know,
don't think we need-
there's matching funds that are needed for flood control, that the only way we're gonna be able to pay for it is if we use $200,000 from this fund, and it has a $2 million balance at that point. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
that's a different situation.
that's a different
Right
situation,
now,
and we can revisit
While
that,
they're
and that's
building
fine.
up the school system, we shouldn't touch it.
I mean,
Yeah,
the only time I would ever want to touch this for something by schools is something like I just mentioned, that's truly an emergency for the city. Yeah, so if we don't need to change anything to be able to do that, then,
The only thing
If
that,
that ever was the case, we could have that conversation
Yeah.
then. And I think that everybody, if that ever was the case, we really needed money that bad, I think that we could explain to everybody that, but I don't really see that happening.
I think the only thing
Possession.
that's OBE, which is overcome by events, is that Ritter gave us the library, and so we put in there, if you recall, we passed this first resolution prior to Judge Mays making the determination that we could have a school system. Okay, so we put in there the library just in case we didn't have a school system.
And,
Now we don't need the library.
I keep going back to
The library
the
would disagree.
Well, we don't need to put the fund in there
If
for a
they
new
get
library.
long-range plans or anything, this would allow us to be a stakeholder in that. Because we don't have the kind of money, I mean, heck, their budget's almost twice what ours is. So the idea that we have the kind of money to fund the schools, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the way that the schools are funded. Because I get a lot of calls from people, saying that, we're trying to steal the money from the schools and whatnot. And, that's absurd. The schools do well, the city does well. We're one and the same. We built an elementary school, that's good for everybody. It's good for education, it's good for economic development, it's good for everything. So I have no problem with keeping that money there. And, worst case scenario, if we build up a, $1 million fund or anything like that, we don't spend it right away. That was good for bond rating and everything anyway. So, I think it's a contentious issue, but it doesn't really have to be. I think it's a solution that we can, and I'm fine with voting on it tonight, just so that we clarify that, they can count on the equivalent of 15 cents every year. We will do that without question. It's the law. But anything else out of that fund, they come to us. We have it there, health and trust, purpose of education. I think everybody's happy with that.
well,
And the other part-
And Frankie, you mentioned you got some emails and phone calls, I think we all did, but, I mean, there are a couple of issues, and you can't see who's sitting here, but we have a superintendent and a number of the school board members. I'm encouraging a lot of those folks to come and talk to the school board, because some of the issues they've raised are basic education questions they feel are not being met, like buses for field trips and things within the classroom they feel like were budgeted that should be done, or at least explained or communicated, that really have nothing to do with this money as it was intended. So I can forward those emails to y'all and let you address those.
No, I got a lot of those too, and I tried to explain to the best of my ability to everybody.
There's a couple of things I think that we need to do to amend some contentious. There was a lot of damage done by this resolution going on the site. Okay, there's a lot of damage done. We've lost a lot of trust from our citizens just by putting this resolution in there. And Hank had mentioned this before the meeting. We need to have a couple of joint board of mayor and alderman meetings with the school board to take a look. I know that they're working on capital improvements, and everybody, if you don't know,